Hello and welcome to Astrology with Zeke. I'm your host, and I'm going to be doing a new series. This will be analyzing the birth charts of various historical figures. Just like with my other series, if there's anyone that you would like me to do, just go ahead, leave their name in the comments, preferably with their birth info, just so there's less legwork for me to do. Anyways, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and dig in. So, we are going to be doing Edward the First of England. So, Edward the First of England, better known as Edward Longshanks, was a force to be reckoned with. He was known as the Hammer of the Scots and has been portrayed many times in pop culture, perhaps the most famous being the movie Braveheart. He has even inspired fictional characters such as Tywin Lannister from Game of Thrones. Often he's portrayed as a very serious man with a pronounced sense of cruel practicality, as someone who is very Saturnian, and not in a good way. But is this accurate? What was he really like? Specifically, what does his birth chart have to say? As I will reveal, his chart speaks to someone who is truly fascinating and full of interesting contradictions. So, to start, let's begin with Edward's rising sign. He was a Pisces rising with his chart ruler Jupiter conjunct his ascendant. This means that he had a tremendous presence. You knew when he was in the room. This is especially true as he was 6'2" or 188 centimeters tall, which was a truly impressive height for the time. He was also a deeply spiritual man, devoted to his faith. It should be noted that he did participate in the Crusades. In fact, he learned of his father's death while returning home and was not actually coronated until 2 years after his father's death due to this. His Jupiter does make some interesting aspects. To start, the most obvious is his Jupiter's exact opposition to his Mars in Virgo 7th house. What this means is that despite being a man dedicated to his faith, he was an absolute control freak in his personal relationships. He fully expected those in his inner circle to fall in line with his wishes, and he was more than well equipped to enforce those expectations. This is further emphasized with the sextile Edward's Uranus in Capricorn 11th house makes to his Jupiter and trine to his Virgo Mars. If anything, it shows that he was very willing and comfortable with going to extreme lengths to enforce his will. And not only that, he nearly always got his way. Personally, I believe this is why many do not know about the fact that he was a very religious man. In addition to the Jupiter-Mars opposition in Edward's chart, it does make a loose but still present T-square with his Mercury, Neptune, and North Node, all of which are conjunct in Gemini 3rd house. This means beyond what we've already mentioned, he was a master of manipulation and deception, being extremely intelligent and having loads of political savvy. He was the kind of person who could masterfully trick others into doing his bidding, all the while getting the other to believe it was their idea in the first place. In fact, his life was ultimately him moving in this direction in order to create a nation that he believed was the best, regardless of the opinions of others. This is easier to see when we look at Edward's younger years, prior to him becoming king. It was known early on that he had political ambitions, and he frequently made moves that made others believe he was planning a coup against his father. I believe that as he got older, he learned from any mistakes that he made, as people with Mercury and Gemini not only tend to be smart, but are quick-witted and highly adaptable. So this would make this quality of his less detectable to others later in his life. With all the aspects to Edward's natal Jupiter out of the way, we'll move on to his sun and moon. Interestingly enough, Edward was born on a full moon, with his sun in Cancer, 4th house, and moon in Capricorn, 10th house. This means that if any planet is aspecting his sun, it is also aspecting his moon. So first let's go over his sun. Cancer sun, 4th house, is someone who is deeply dedicated to family, home, and tradition. This is further amplified for Edward as he wasn't just some guy, he was the king. For him, England was his family. This is further illustrated with his Venus being conjunct his sun. This means that he truly loved his people and saw it as a duty to do right by them. We can also see this with his Capricorn moon. Edward was the kind of person who worked tirelessly on behalf of his people and took his role as king very seriously. To him, it was not merely a privilege, it was a sacred duty from God. To my mind, I believe he truly believed in his divine right to rule. It was God's will that he rule England, and it was his duty to live up to God's expectations of him. The final planet in Edward's chart, along with the aspects it makes, will be Edward's Saturn in Cancer, 5th house. The 5th house is all about your creative endeavors, what you do for fun, and your relationship with children. This is a very unfortunate placement for Edward, as not only is Saturn in detriment in Cancer, but Saturn in the 5th house is generally a bad placement, as Saturn is all about restriction, order, and discipline. As an example, Edward had at least 14 children in his lifetime. However, of those children, only 6 outlived their father. Most of his children died before even reaching adulthood. To continue, he was not a good father to his children as he took his role as king very seriously, maybe even too seriously at times. This means that there was very little room left for him to be available to his children. That being said, there is another slightly more positive way to look at his Saturn. Edward's Saturn makes both a trine to his Jupiter and a sextile to his Mars. What this tells me is that Edward leaned heavily into his faith to carry him through the hard times of his life, again believing that his life was not one to be enjoyed. Rather, he was placed here to create the structure for a homeland in which his people would be secure and a force to be reckoned with. His sextile with Mars provides the energy to bring this vision into reality, enduring any hardship and doing what must be done to see his dream become a reality. Edward was a man of endless reserves, of inner strength and grit. Edward's Saturn is also a part of another T-square, opposing his Uranus in Capricorn with his Pluto in Libra at the apex. This T-square echoes a lot of what has already been mentioned with other placements in Edward's chart. Specifically, this T-square represents someone who is willing to manipulate and dominate whoever he must to get what he wants. That being said, it is not done because this person is a true sadist and enjoys hurting others. Rather, it is a cold, calculated strategy in which empathy is removed from the equation when seeking the most efficient way to achieve any given goal. This placement tells me that the way Edward is portrayed in pop culture is highly accurate. So, it's been absolutely fascinating analyzing Edward Longshanks' chart. I still have a hard time deciding whether it can be said that Edward was a good man, given how comfortable he was with resorting to cruel measures when he deemed it appropriate. That being said, what I can say with certainty is that Edward Longshanks was exceedingly efficient and a force to be reckoned with. You would definitely not cross him lightly, as there would be a very good chance you would live to regret it. I also think that when we view him through the lens of the time he lived in, and from an English point of view, he was an exceptionally good king. So that's going to about do it for Edward Longshanks' chart. I hope you enjoyed it. I do have another 2 lined up who are closely related to Edward Longshanks, and that's all I'm going to give for now. Yeah, and again, if there's anyone you would like me to do, go ahead, leave their name in the comments. Preferably with their birth data if you have it. Also, I do astrology readings, birth chart readings professionally. If you'd like to book my services, go ahead and check out my website, astrologywithzeke.com. I'll leave that in the description below. I also have a Substack where I've done analyses of other famous people, namely the 4 presidents on Mount Rushmore. If you want to check out those articles, go ahead and check out the link to those in the description as well. Anyways, that'll about do it for today, and we'll see you all next time.